Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is August 28th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I will be your host. You can send your questions and comments to us via email at the questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them in the chat page and we'll get them channeled to us. Helga, you've been emphasizing for the last week or so that the next 3 to 6 months will be the most dangerous period in human history. And the International Peace Coalition has just issued a statement on what must be done to avoid tragedy, titled Council of Reason, Not Council of War. That's available at the schillerinstitute.com site. Interestingly, as NATO's been running roughshod over red lines, Russian Major General, I think his name is Alaudinov, called on citizens in the West to wake up before it's too late and get into the streets and demonstrate. Now, in this context, we have our first question from a U.S. podcaster with military ties. He writes, clearly the Western establishment has decided to use war and wartime methods such as coups, assassinations, and censorship to protect their empire. What do you think it will take to move more prominent individuals to back your efforts to have Western nations give up their imperial dreams and instead work with the BRICS and the Global South? And he refers to the statements of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard when they were endorsing Donald Trump, where they warned of the danger of nuclear war. Are these the kind of statements that can help move us away from World War III?
I think it's definitely useful and extremely urgent. I think the first step to avoid catastrophe is that the populations all over the world, not just on both sides of the Atlantic, but emphatically also in the Global South, wake up to the absolute urgent fact that we are on the verge of nuclear war. And I think this is not generally understood in the depths and the seriousness of the situation. Because in the recent days, many experts, analysts, also on both sides of the Atlantic, have made the argument that the invasion in the Kursk region inside Russia is not what some media were initially portraying it as, namely, that Ukraine would make a surprise attack on Russian territory, conquer some Russian territory as a bargaining chip for negotiations, when there's peace settlements, that basically, Ukraine would have something to bargain with in terms of territory occupied by Russia inside Ukraine. Now, what emerges instead is indeed a picture which I think is no doubt anymore, that the reason why the Ukrainians put their best equipped and best trained battalion into Kursk has a completely different nature. This is without any doubt a brigade, I think, which is, not like the people right now in the Donbass, which are, dying by the high numbers every day. But this is a brigade trained on the top level of NATO training, NATO equipment, NATO machinery, and supply from data and satellites and being connected. This is top standard of NATO. So the question actually one would ask, or I asked myself initially, why would the Ukrainians, or why would whoever backs Ukraine do this? Why not reinforce the troops in Ukraine itself, who are clearly losing territory all the time? Is it just for a PR effect? Is it for to prove that the Ukrainians are still capable of delivering, and therefore causing Western equipment to be sent and shipped continuously to Ukraine. That was one hypothesis, but now as more reports are coming in, more experts are making their statements, it is more clear that the reason of this is that it's actually part of a NATO attack on Russia with the aim to keep going, to not stop. And I think it's definitely very hair-raisingly reaching the point, or has reached the point already, where the threat to the territorial integrity of Russia is becoming such, that the nuclear doctrine of Russia kicks in. And Foreign Minister Lavrov repeated that just yesterday and said that the West, the people who are the men and women who are controlling the nuclear weapons in the West are playing with fire. They're playing with matches in such a way as if they have never grown up. So, and others like Gilbert Doktorov, a well-known, experienced expert, he basically makes the argument that that it's reaching or has reached the point already, or is about to reach the point where the nuclear option is the only thing left for Russia. Now, obviously, the Russian military general staff and leadership know that part of the game is to entrap Russia into using nuclear weapons, which obviously, if that would happen, would be aimed to discredit Russia, especially in the eyes of the rest of the world, the global South, China, many forces, actually everybody around the world would distance themselves from Russia. Now, I don't know, this is becoming ludicrous. This is becoming a game and calculations, with the nuclear Armageddon, with the possibility of the extinction of the human civilization. And, I think that given the fact that, the whole control of the military industrial complex, the, NATO is, obviously of vital interest of those who are in power right now. I think there will be any effort made to prevent that Trump will, win the presidency again. I think, the danger zone is now. I think we are reaching the end of certain processes all at once right now. So I think that, I stick to my concern that the period between now and the election, and then the next point, the entering of the next president into the White House, is the period of the heightened, most dangerous instability so far. That doesn't mean that, depending how things go, that danger will diminish afterwards. But I think we have to be absolutely on alert. And I really think that the situation is much, much more dangerous than during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's for sure more dangerous than during the middle-range missile crisis in the 80s. And at that time, there were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. And I think what is required now is not hundreds of thousands, but millions of people in the streets everywhere.
Now, part of that question of waking up is for all of our viewers to send in your questions and comments, participate in this dialogue, and then take it out to everyone you know, because we have to have that kind of mobilization that's been going on with the International Peace Coalition. Helga, given what you just said, there's a question that just came in. Do you think NATO is crazy enough to attack Russian nuclear energy plants?
Well, I think, obviously, in a lot of things which are happening, they are done in such a way that they always involve the possibility of plausible denial. I think you will not see a situation where NATO openly would attack Russian nuclear plans, unless you are in the middle of a combat of actual warfare already. But I think the danger that this happens is enormous. And I think there were 3 drone attacks on nuclear plants. One, I think, on Zaporozhye, and 2 on the Kursk nuclear plant, which were defeated by Russian air defense systems, so they did not, cause the damage. But about that, I want to really say that several nuclear scientists have commented that in the meantime. And what I find most remarkable is that the Greens internationally, especially the Greens in Germany, who for decades were saying, oh, we are against civilian use of nuclear energy because what if ever there is a military attack on a nuclear plant? This could cause incredible radiation, terrible damage. Well, I have not heard one beep from the Greens in Germany, nor any other Greens condemning the drone attacks on these 3 nuclear plants. And the fact that they were shot down does not diminish the intention of those who were shooting it. So the Greens, in my view, have completely discredited themselves one more time as complete fraud, totally ideological, not even concerned about nuclear fallout, as they are not concerned about other damages like the CO2 emissions from war deployments and warships and warplanes. So in my view, the non-action, non-reaction by the Greens should really give the Green voters something to think about.
Well, that just leads into the next question, which comes from a Russian television news reporter or producer who asked about the upcoming elections in Thüringen and Saxony on September 1st, and the possibility for a major shakeup, a major defeat for the coalition government, including for the Greens. And he asked the question, will this change things in Germany? Will this change the Scholz government's position of being totally subordinate to the Anglo-American policy?
Well, I think it will be a big blow for sure. If it's enough to really change this government, one has to see. As of now, the polls are both in Thüringen and Saxony that the AfD will come in first. The CDU in Saxony will lose the office of the minister president. And, the BSW, the Wagenknecht party, will come in strong second or third, depending how it goes. Now, let me point out something extremely important in this context. Kretschmer, the minister president of Saxony, was leading in the polls until recently. And then he made a statement saying that he, while he is for negotiations and dialogue with Russia, nevertheless backs the stationing of the long-range US missiles in Germany from 1926 onward, and whereupon he dropped in the polls such that he is now no longer number one, and it may very well be that the AfD will be the strongest party come the election. Now, let me say a couple of words on this long-range missile stationing, because I think it's much, much more important than people think. Now, first of all, this was apparently a decision made by the United States. That's what Scholz said after the Nato summit, and he said this was a good decision. He admitted, therefore, that there was no German participation in it. It now seems that there were pre-discussions before the NATO summit between Germany and the United States on that topic. Now, one first of all has to see it in the context of the change in the nuclear doctrine by the United States in March, which which was secret. It's not even electronically available because it's so top secret and it changes the US nuclear posture to an expected three-front war with Russia, China, and North Korea. Now that was in March. So apparently, when the NATO summit happened in July, that obviously was already under the rubric of this changed US nuclear doctrine, and therefore also the decision to deploy long-range missiles in Germany. Now, there was no broad discussion in NATO about this bilateral agreement between Germany and the United States. There is no mentioning of it in the NATO statement. And what that means is that a decision which clearly is changing the strategic balance between Russia and the United States and severely threatens and worsens the security interest of Germany by making it a nuclear target, because Russia will for sure counter that with symmetric or asymmetric, but more likely symmetric counter moves. So that means, there was no debate, obviously not in Germany, not in the Bundestag, not in the public, not in, the media, but also not among the allies, the European allies. Now, contrary to the, the Nato Nachrüstungsbeschluss, I don't know how this word is now in English, the decision in 1979 to, which led to the Pershing II SS-20 middle-range missile crisis in the beginning of the 80s. At that time, there were 4 allies, additional allies, part of it, and they were naturally consulted, and this time not. This is the first time that, in the entire post-war history, that Germany is again doing something completely singular. It brings forward the ghost of the Deutsche Sonderweg, the Germany's special path, which historians, hold responsible for having been the road which ended in National Socialism and the Nazis in the 30s. So for Germany, again, to go on a single path without consultation with the allies, when that decision clearly touches upon the security interest of all the allies in Europe, because, the consequences will be felt not only by Germany, but by all of Europe. And I can only predict that many of the smaller countries will feel that they have been trampled over, or rather their security interests have been trampled over by this unilateral decision of Germany. And I think, given the tension in the EU already, this will have a very erosive effect on the unity of NATO, on the unity of the EU, because this is not something built on trust, on confidence, on reliability, and I think this is felt by people. I think the discussion about that has just begun, because it's quite a while till 26, but naturally 26 February is also the time when the START treaty runs out. And at that point, you will have absolutely no single disarmament agreement anymore. And that is the place when the US is planning to put their long-range missiles into Germany. So if there is not a super escalation now in the immediate period, which I think there will be, I think the latest at that point, you will have a major crisis in Europe. And I think people are sensing that. I think, the more intelligent and more watchful parts of the population are already concerned. And that is why, the political parties who are endorsing this are dropping in the polls, like a hot potato. And, I think the consequences of this are absolutely severe. In any case, I wanted to say this because there is a lot more going on than just meets the eye. But I think one can be sure that Germany will change nationwide because these two state elections and another one later in the year have national implications.
Well, on what you were just talking about, we have a question from one of our regular correspondents, Debashis. What about differences in NATO generals that we are not privy to see? Are there divisions? Are there differences?
Well, for sure, because what I just referred to before. I mean, there was if these missiles, which are supposed to be American missiles on German territory, there was previously a discussion that there should eventually be a joint Italian, French, German missile system that apparently is affected by this. And I think behind the scenes, I'm quite certain that there is a lot of disunity. And if you look at the political landscape in Europe right now, it's one of chaos. It's not exaggerated. France is not having a government yet. Macron is nixing certain options. France is in chaos. I think the coalition government in Berlin is the most unpopular government in the history of the post-war history of Germany. I think that other smaller countries like Hungary, Slovakia, but also other countries in Eastern Europe are really not agreeing with the present course. So I think we are sitting on a powder keg. In what I said, this unilateral decision by the United States, emphatically, forcing it down the throat of Germany to put these missiles into Germany. I think this will have a very eroding effect.
Now, we have some questions coming in that relate to this idea of wartime preparations, such as censorship and so on. Diana from Canada says, I'm certain most Canadians have no idea of what's happening outside the country. National media won't cover it and downplay the severity. And she said, I think it will take a horrible event similar to 9/11 to wake them up. Now, we have also from an Australian who is active in the Assange campaign, the campaign to free Julian Assange, who said after all the exposure of the efforts in the Assange case to suppress free speech, they're at it again in a bigger way, targeting Scott Ritter, the arrest of the CEO of Telegram, Pavel Durov, the chasing of the Rumble CEO out of Europe. I mean, he said he had to leave Europe for security reasons, the arrest of Richard Medhurst. And she says, where are the honest reporters who should be reporting this? Where are the civil libertarians? Where are the statesmen?
Well, it's a very, very appropriate question. Where are they? I think there is right now, I forgot now where it came from, but it came maybe from South Africa or some other country of the global South, a suit against the mainstream media of having been complicit in the genocide in Gaza. And, why that may not look like the most urgent question in light of what's going on there, I think it's the absolute unbelievable horror. 20% of the people in Gaza are reportedly acutely dying of hunger, of starvation. And the world is, not doing nothing adequate to stop it, which I think will be a stain on the memory and the conscience of all of those who have been quiet about it. But even worse, the media, the mainstream media, for the most part, are part of the narrative, which always says, following the unprovoked war of aggression. No, that's Ukraine, I'm sorry. Following the aggression of Hamas on 7th of October, and then they say whatever else is happening. But always you have to give it the appearance that what is happening now is only the result of what happened on the 7th of October and covering up, to a very large extent, the enormity of what is going on in Gaza. So they're being sued, to be held responsible of being co-responsible. And, maybe this will not affect the events today and tomorrow because, we are still not, also the deployment of the 2 aircraft carriers of the United States in the region, has raised questions. What are they there for? Are they for possible regional war in the Middle East, or are they even part of a larger deployment, in the Nato Russia confrontation? But whatever happens in the short term, I think if we get out alive of this crisis, which is not certain by no means, because we are closer to World War III than at any time before. If we get out of this, the behavior of the West, of the media, of the so-called, politicians in high positions, that will not go away. It will be a stain on the conscience, a stain in the history, because, people who are in power may think, we are now in a pre-war situation and therefore you can order that there's only one view allowed. But, if you look at back in history, the historians, provided there will be historians left, which again is not certain, that there will be a history writing, and the history will not be written this time by the victorious powers of whatever, like in the post-war period of the Second World War, where you had a history which was largely, emphasizing the viewpoint of the victorious powers. Recently, the role of Russia or the Soviet Union has been written out of that history, at least in the Western parts of history recorded. But I think, given the dramatic change which is taking place right now, where the global South is already playing a much larger part in developments, I think, I'm really concerned if we don't get our way back in Europe, in the United States, we will be discredited for a very, very long time. If you think about, how long it took for Germany to recover from, being at the low point in the period of the Nazi dictatorship, I think we are really urgently required to, change our course and go back to dialogue. We may be beyond that point already because, I think we have gambled away a lot of options already. But, I think it has to be now a broad discussion among the people, in the parliaments, but, the entire public is called to debate this. We cannot go like sheep to the slaughterhouse. We have to have an open discussion. What is in the interest of our countries and of humanity as a whole?
We have a report in here, Helga, that this is the largest number of people watching live that we've had. So that's a good sign, but we need to keep building it. Emmanuel sent a note saying that his view is that the purpose of the Kursk campaign by Ukraine and NATO is to provide political cover for incumbents hoping for re-election and who will indeed continue the war. Now, on that note, we had an earlier question for you. Is there anything to the report that the International Criminal Court will proceed with indictments of Netanyahu and Gallant and the Palestinian leaders? Of course, 2 of them who were part of the indictment are dead now. But the person asks, why won't Harris endorse the ICC report if she really cares about Palestinians?
Well, I think people should ask her that at any rally, at any town meeting and election event possible, because, the reality of the situation concerning the genocide in Gaza is there is only one place which could stop it, and that is the US government. And, I mean, obviously, Biden Biden backed Netanyahu to the point of where we are now, and Kamala Harris pretends to be more sympathetic. But I think there's only one way to stop it, and that would be that the United States would have to bring in their full power to lean on Israel in such a way that they had to do it, and they're the only ones. So I think the fact that this is not coming, should, I think, that just proves that Kamala Harris has not changed from, one policy to the opposite. I think she has not undergone that transformation. She's just, obviously in an election campaign, a lot of words are being used to create a positive image. But I'm still waiting for anything substantial coming from Kamala Harris. I have not seen any sign of it.
Well, I don't think you're the only one waiting. I think the whole press corps claims to be waiting, but they haven't pressed her yet. Now, I would encourage people to go to the schillerinstitute.com website and download the statement that was issued by the International Peace Coalition, Council of Reason, not Council of War. And there are a couple of questions on this that I think we can conclude with. From a regular Jerry, he asks about a Westphalian agreement with Britain. Shouldn't that be the emphasis, to try to get an agreement with Britain, since they're so much involved in things? And he also says that, I think the constant rhetoric about nuclear war is actually instigating it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there is a recent interview by an Italian general who was the head of the IFOR in Afghanistan, and he basically said that the instigator of this present Ukraine crisis is the British, and I think that is absolutely the case, and therefore I think I do not put my hopes on the British at all, simply because their empire is what is at stake. Now, people think the British Empire no longer exists. I think it definitely exists in the form of the Anglosphere, the idea of the neocons to rule the world based on the special Anglo-American relationship. And that is why we are in the mess we are. So, I think that the reason why we are in such a crisis is because we are experiencing the end phase of an empire, and I can only say I do not believe that the leading institutions will change. I think it does require the absolute mobilization of the masses of the people to go in the streets. I don't think that there is any way how you can solve it without that. I don't think that will be the only thing which is required, which is why I have called for the creation of this Council of Reason, which is slowly moving, but it's moving. There is a serious discussion to look out for those individuals of outstanding character and contribution to the well-being of mankind. And it's coming together. It's not as quick as I would wish to, but it is being seriously discussed, because many people are absolutely at a point of despair. What can be done to prevent mankind from going into a catastrophe of which nobody would be left to even comment about it?
Well, let me conclude by reminding people that the International Peace Coalition will be meeting again, as it has for every Friday for, I think now, 65 weeks. And maybe you could say something in conclusion, to inspire people to participate in that, because it's become an extremely important forum for the kind of people that should be on the Council of Reason to discuss how to wake up the population. So, Helga, why don't you say something about this week's meeting?
Yeah, and just to comment on the aspect of the previous question, that the rhetoric about World War III is instigating it. It's the opposite. Look, I'm discussing with important people in different countries, and there's only a few people, a small percentage of people who are aware of how far advanced this thing is. I mean, the idea that you ignore all the red lines of Russia and then say, you see, Putin didn't answer with nuclear weapons yet, that means there are no red lines, so we can continue. This is the most foolish, most criminal, and most idiotic, policy you can possibly have. The reality is, that we are right now already almost, at the point of no return in terms of, threatening to come to the point where Russia will have no other way than to resort to its own nuclear doctrine. So I think that danger is very immediate. The fact that the Kursk deployment is not for bargaining of a peace negotiation for Ukraine, but if you think it through, it is part of a general deployment of NATO into the territory with German tanks, with American soldiers, with the whole spectrum being into Russia already. And that brings us extremely close to the danger of really a point of no return. So that will be the issue at the upcoming IPC meeting on Friday. We already have lined up very important speakers. I think we will put on the Schiller side today or tomorrow, probably today, the list of speakers, and our participant number is growing. We had in the last several weeks always around 550, 600 participants, and afterwards many more. So, and more than 50 countries being represented. I think next time we have for sure Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, several others, so I think that, you should join it. I think the most important thing is to internationalize the peace movement, because we have to be united to be strong enough so that we get the kind of effect like we had it with the middle-range missile crisis in the 80s, which did contribute to the conclusion of the INF Treaty. And right now we need a lot more. So I can only say the 1st of September, we have demonstrations in many parts of the world. This International Peace Day. Look out for where these demonstrations are. The 28th, you have both Scott Ritter's rally, also Rage Against the War Machine. Then on the 3rd of October, nationwide demonstrations in Germany. And you should look out and build them. Tell all your neighbors and colleagues to go in the streets and demonstrate for peace. And that all will be discussed this coming Friday.
Well, Helga, thank you for joining us today. And hopefully everyone who's on with us right now will be joining you again on Friday.
Till Friday.